This paper is it's co-authored with Smriti, who is sitting right in front and has sort of the better part of the job than me. But so the paper, as the name suggests, is network effects in India's online businesses, a computational analysis. In continuation with Mr. Khan's discussion in the morning, this paper actually sort of tries to look into the competition area and how online businesses in India should be or is being regulated. There are two reasons why this particular paper, or we feel this paper is important, because we are looking at this particular sector where a lot of analysis hasn't happened, at least from the competition law point of view. The sector remains, as I was suggesting, Mr. Kant was saying in the morning, that areas where people are not very sure whether regulation is correct, whether regulation is necessary. The law and policy area on this particular sector is still up in grabs. And secondly, this is also one of the most dynamic and one of the most important sectors from the point of view of the market in terms of investment and other opportunities. So an analysis was perhaps overdue. We begin with asking these very few questions. These are very basic questions of any free market economy. Market economy works best when firms in competitive markets continuously innovate to produce better quality products at cheaper costs. It's almost a given thing for any competition lawyer or for any competition law. What happens when a monopoly is set up or achieved, and what is the role of competition law? We are particularly interested in knowing, should a firm be allowed to deliberately sacrifice profits in order to gain or protect a dominant or a monopoly position, which would result in the exit of efficient competitors from the market and gain those monopoly rents without actually innovating, actually having any business acumen. Just the fact that they can systematically undercut or systematically sacrifice profits on a continuous basis because of deeper pockets. Is that something that we'll want for a market economy to work? That's the basic question that we try to address in this paper. Now, we begin as online businesses is sort of a term that we have used in our title, but we are looking at what is known as what Richard Posner calls as the new economy firms, internet firms, telecommunications, hardware, software, anything to perhaps do with the use of technology or technology-based products. Now, in order to understand why this market is so peculiar, or why this market is a little different from traditional markets, and why therefore a traditional computational analysis is perhaps unwarranted for these markets, we want to quickly go through the features of these markets. One of the principal features of the online market is what is known as network effects. What happens is, the reason that we all want to use WhatsApp is not necessarily because how good that particular product is, but also because we have all our other friends on that particular network. So the valuation of a network keeps on increasing as more people join the network. Now, this quickly gives us a hint that if you are a person who wants to have a product with network effects, your main target is to gain more people onto the network rather than perhaps innovating that particular product on a continuous basis. Hold on to that thought as we progress. High innovation and technological changes is the next feature of this particular market. Why this is important is because network effects is not something that is unique to online businesses. Network effects can happen to even the common grocery store, where the large number of people who they might have coupons, you might keep on coming back to them. But the reason why network effects in technology sectors is very important, because the pace of growth is so quick that it's very difficult for regulators to react in an appropriate time before the market mishap is about to occur. Average unit cost reduces with scale. Just to give you an example, the amount of investment that goes on in developing an app or developing a software is the highest amount of investment that goes in. Reproducing it on a continuous basis is often includes minuscule amount of cost. So as the scale goes up, you have your average unit cost reduces. Availability of capital. This is something very unique about this sector. This sector actually does not need a lot of capital, but it is still one of the most invested sectors in terms of, in terms of either domestic or foreign capital. User data as input. Now, this is something again which helps. Going back to our network effects logic, the more people use a particular network, the more people use a particular technology, the more people give data to the technology, which can be systematically and strategically used to provide the user exactly what they want. A prime example is our Facebook's, the feeder page, where whenever we go on, we keep on seeing things which we are interested in, or pages which we're interested in, which is basically a smart use of data, and that sort of helps to reinforce the network effects. People keep on going back to that technology because and keep on giving more data to the technology. Now, you remember we began with a discussion that why an industry which is interested in or which is in a network industry, their main aim is to have or accumulate more people onto the network to increase the valuation of the network. Now, there are these 2 points. Average unit cost reduces with scale and availability of capital. You need less amount of capital to continue the business, but you have more amount of capital with you. What do you do with that? You start discounting. You start giving people free goods. It's almost like, with all due respects to people from Tamil Nadu, it's almost that sort of a thing in the market. You give free goods to people, to get people attracted onto your network. Just to elaborate a little bit of the network effect, this particular sort of market, the market at a point of time tilts in favor of a technology. My mistake, tips in favor of a technology. The tipping point is reached because a particular network earns a critical mass of users. Economists have studied these markets and have suggested when tipping happens, additional, or even in conditions of free entry, addition of new entrants doesn't change the incentive or the structure of the market. So therefore, or in some ways, borrowing a term which Ajay used in one of his op-eds, money has become the new raw material. The more money you have, the more freely you can distribute goods, the more people comes onto your network, they give you more data, and the more successfully you will be able to reach the tipping point early. The case that we have used for our analysis is the Ola taxi aggregation app. Again, we are highlighting this is something that is not only with Ola. Almost all e-commerce businesses systematically is going through certain similar circumstances, but we have chosen Ola because it is having an ongoing litigation before the Competition Commission of India. Now, if you look at this particular snapshot, you will see Ola has sustained losses. Losses are increasing over a period of time than its revenue. Ola's business model is to basically connect people and take commission from it. Why are they doing that? I mean, it's just peculiar to ask, why will somebody with rampant amount, tranches of investments coming in, they're spending money on actually losing revenue rather than perhaps developing the app. For people who have been using the Ola app, there hasn't been a lot of changes in that app. It has still sort of remained the same. Ola hasn't entered into any new line of business like perhaps Paytm wants to do. But why is it sustaining this loss? Just to highlight, fleet operate cost is 9.2 billion. 82% of its expenses is actually to discount customers to use their service and to incentivize drivers to use to sort of, select the customers who's using the Ola app. So, we'll return back to why this is problematic, but there's another thing that is happening in this particular pretty world of taxi aggregation or taxi hailing cabs. Now, these are the 5 big players, roughly speaking, in the world, and look at the cross holdings of their investors. You can't see it, but you can get a hint as to how much of inter-linkages there is among investors. This is another peculiarity. Typically, competitors do not want to share information with each other. But in the taxi aggregation apps, you have a few handful amount of investors who have invested across these companies. So basically, there are common ownership of competing firms. Why is it problematic? It is problematic from a competition point of view, of course, because you have the specter of share of information. Professor El Harsh of Harvard Law School has written a paper where he has tried to say that, which is called horizontal shareholding, where his emphasis is that, this sort of, there is actually, you might not actually have a collusion among your investors. The portfolio companies, they know who their investors are. They know that you have common ownership with your competing businesses. They want further tranches of investments coming down to you. So they will keep in mind what is the business interest of their investors while devising their successive rounds of business strategy. So common ownership is a problem from that point of view. Again, we have tried to highlight it is not something that is peculiar to Ola. It is something that happens with all types of e-commerce businesses or online businesses which display network effects. The other peculiar problem is that of investor facilitated buyouts. You have Tiger and Axel, which owned both Flipkart and Myntra. Had investments and then facilitated a merger between that. That's also something that is problematic. Strategic investors. So you have Alibaba, for example, who is in e-commerce business and has invested in Snapdeal in India, which is another e-commerce sector. Now, are these problematic? Let's just quickly move into the Competition Act and very quickly highlight to you what the areas which relates to this particular industry. Now, our paper obviously looks at the network effects and the competition analysis, but it also gives us an opportunity to explore the competition agency's sort of jurisprudence in this sector, and we try to highlight, at least very briefly in this paper, what is going on with the Competition Commission and sort of online businesses. Now, as we know that there are, if there is an abuse of dominance analysis, it is a three-step process. You have to determine relevant market, you have to determine a dominant position, and then you will have to analyze if there is an abuse. Now, when determining relevant market, CCI has been a little inconsistent in terms of defining what the relevant product market is in online and offline markets. For e-commerce sectors, they have said that online and offline are different means of distribution of the same product, so they are the same relevant market. What happens if the relevant market is large enough? Small player or big players in a larger market obviously has small share, they do not remain dominant. When it comes to taxi aggregation apps, they have said that taxi apps is different, or it forms a different product than your regular app, your regular yellow or black cabs. Again, they are inconsistent as to why a brick and mortar bookstore is same in terms of the market of distribution of books as a Flipkart, but why is my Ola app not different in terms of from the taxi apps? Again, they have not given a lot of explanation, but there it stands. The other thing is geolocation tools. Use of geolocation tools in apps is often viewed by CCI that the relevant geographic market, the market where conditions of competition are homogeneous, will be restricted to that particular area where the geolocation app is sort of providing with its service. But to give you an example, a lot of apps use geolocation tools to match the service to that area where that particular service is being demanded. Book My Show, you go to the particular app, the website, the first thing it asks is where you are. Therefore, the relevant geographic markets gets limited to a particular small area. And because our agency often relies upon qualitative analysis than quantitative data, the more unique a product becomes, the more smaller the relevant market becomes. Going back to the Ola case, the CCI held that the Ola app gives such a unique experience to the customers of tracking, of 24-hour of service, of taxi hailing, that customers won't leave that particular app. Now, this was not based upon any customer survey or any or at least the judgment did not report any reliance upon any quantitative data. Now, why is this important from the point of view of online businesses? We often presume that often online businesses are small startups which are going through this particular dynamic phase of rounds of investment, and we always think abuse of dominant position is something for the big guys, the DLF guys in the room. But once the product markets gets delineated based upon the uniqueness of a product, you might be the only guy who is selling that product in that particular market. So even if you have technically a small player, but the CCI has the capacity of delineating the market in a manner that you will be perhaps dominant. The other aspect which we want to quickly highlight before returning to our original analysis of network businesses is this unfair distinction between predatory and unfair price. CCI, in a very celebrated case in NSE, decided that predatory price is a part of what they call as unfair price. So if what they actually termed it as a competition between a big guy and a small guy. So a big guy who has a lot of resources and a small guy who doesn't have a lot of resources. If the big guy is is charging an unfair price, in the case here, NSE was charging a zero price for trading in the CD segment as opposed to MCX, it's an unfair price. It's what they call a David and a Goliath competition. So in some ways, if you have a lot of investments, a lot of funds with you, you're an internet player, and your brick and mortar stores or your brick and mortar counterparts, your offline counterparts who doesn't have a lot of resources can come to CCI and say that your pricing strategy is unfair because they have more resources than us. We do not know how CCI will react, but the NSE doesn't give us a nice taste in the mouth. Coming back to the network businesses, we began with this idea that perhaps it is not okay that somebody who has merely a lot of money with it can systematically undercut prices over a sustained period of time without adding any value to the product and be able to achieve what is known as a monopoly or a near monopoly situation. Network markets are characterized, the natural equilibria, the economists tell us, of network markets is that it is usually characterized by one or a few players. Our investigation is not to suggest that the CCI should be able to actually structure network markets that it remains competitive. Our analysis is only limited. Does CCI have a role? Does CCI have a role to see if certain players in network markets are trying to tip the market in their favor, not by innovating, not by giving customers better goods, but simply by undercutting or what is known as exclusionary practices. Now, this is a strange dichotomy within our act. Why? Because unlike the Sherman Act, which allows which doesn't allow predatory practices to be permitted either to gain a monopoly position or to retain a monopoly position, for us, you can only predate if you are already a dominant company. In network markets, at the time when it tips, at the time when you actually become the dominant company, the harm may have already been done. Network markets are also considered by many as classical entry barriers because the network doesn't allow even new players to come in very quickly because of the the inherent price inequalities of this particular market. New entrants they do not come in very quickly into those markets. So we wanted to explore, is it possible to have a standard, what is known as imminent dominance? If competition authorities can see that a particular firm is on a path of imminent dominance, which basically means that it is not yet in a dominant position, but the practices, the strategies they have developed, given the structure of the market, dominance is a fait accompli for that particular player. And in that case, can the commission, instead of waiting for the tipping to happen, instead of waiting for the efficient competitor to exit the market, can it have a sort of a quick look at to what is going on in that particular market? We are for a minute not saying that the competition authority should be able to go in and suggest that who will remain in the market and who will not. But can the competition commission see that is a predatory tactic in play, and what you're doing is, because in network markets, firms, they actually compete for tomorrow's markets today, because they know that if they can tip the market, it's actually the discounting, in some ways classically called as future profits. Is that situation in play? So in some way, the way forward that we have tried to imagine is that under the current law, it is not permissible because of the wording of Section 4. So in some way, that needs to be changed, either voluntary interpretation by the CCI or through a legislative mandate. But here is something else I want to quickly highlight. Along with this particular sort of enlarging of the jurisdiction of the CCI, it is very important that the concept of recoupment of losses is in play. What is recoupment of losses? In a sense that if if there's a possibility to recoup the loss that a predator is making, then it is a problem. If you cannot recoup the loss after competitors have exited the market, then it is a good thing that you are undercutting because the customers are benefiting in the meanwhile. Network effects give you a classic example because of the gross inequality of that particular returns of prices in that market, that efficient competitors, once they exit, it is very difficult for them to come back. So recoupment of losses gives us an understanding to sort of differentiate between genuine discounting to get a toehold into the market and what we are trying to highlight, a systematic, sustained undercutting of prices by Ola over a huge period of time. And again, I keep on highlighting it is not only Ola, it is a lot of other firms. To give you a quick hint, according to the PE database, in 2015 alone, the amount of the losses that the only e-commerce companies have sustained, and you remember, Ola is not an e-commerce company, but we have an e-commerce company data, is 51.5 billion. Rupees 51.5 billion is the amount of losses that they have sustained. And they still remain the largest amount of investments in terms of investor money has actually flown into these particular companies. So again, our paper wanted to examine, we are very conscious of the fact that we do not want to go into an MRTP style threshold based analysis of expansion. That is not our lookout. We do not want to say that because you are in a network industry, if you go beyond 40%, you have to keep on coming back to the CCI for, to be able to sort of grow further. The only area which we want to highlight is that because of the peculiarities of this particular industry, because of the fact that this industry doesn't allow entry as easily as in the traditional forms, because the return in this industry is predominantly based upon the fact of an early mover advantage to tip the market in your favor, perhaps it is possible for the CCI to ensure that efficient competitors doesn't exit quickly. And why is India different? Why is the Indian case different? We suspect, and this is something that we are only suspecting and we are conjecturing, and that's what we'll put out in the paper, is that the same technology which went through cycles of innovation, where the Schumpeterian model was played out in America, has been experimented in China, and is being backed by a few private equity investors in India. So therefore there is, when people keep on saying it's a new economy, so you will have this huge competition, somebody will completely oust you, they'll come up with a new technology. We suspect that, the investors are only backing a few guys. Or not even a few guys, one guy, one technology. So there aren't enough opportunities for somebody else to actually develop the new one to even cause an entry. And we have always, as we have highlighted, even if there was one, entry in such markets always remains a little problematic. Thank you.